Yeah, it's the same chair that you saw.
Yes,
before.
yes. That's what I could recognize.
Right. Okay, so we have a relatively short chapter this week. Four of the 64 items. So we'll just wait another minute and then we can start.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's start. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sabhahutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vigamscha He Krishna Karuna Sandhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namuste Tapta Kancha Nagorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we are studying chapter 10 today of the Nectar of Devotion. And this chapter covers only 4 devotional principles: hearing, expecting the Lord's mercy, remembering, and meditation. So hearing, just before we begin reading from Prabhupada's book, excuse me. There's 3 ways to perform hearing that Prabhupada will explain. Nama Shravana, or hearing the name, Charita Shravana, or hearing Krishna's pastimes, and Gunadi Shravana, or hearing about the qualities, etc., of Krishna. And the first reference, which is from the Garuda Purana, it talks about hearing Krishna's name. The second, from the 4th canto, describes hearing Krishna's pastimes. And the last reference from the 12th canto in this section deals with hearing his glories and his transcendental qualities. So let's look at that first section. And in the very beginning of that section, Srila Prabhupada writes that the beginning of Krishna consciousness and devotional service is hearing. In Sanskrit, called Shravanam, all people should be given the chance to come and join devotional parties so that they may hear. This hearing is very important for progressing in Krishna consciousness. How many of you first became interested in Krishna consciousness by hearing some philosophy or hearing the Harinam party or kirtan, something like that? Could you, you could maybe go to reactions and, Chandra Babu said yes, and Rajeshri Pran Mataji. I saw Achyuta Padaravinda Prabhu raise his hand. Amal says so. Yes, Rasa Sindhu Giridhari Prabhu. Any others? Oh, Ram Krishnan has his hand up. Anyone else became interested in Krishna consciousness? Sridhar says that, and Manikandan. Very good. So I think that's pretty much the first thing. Someone just started preaching to me and explaining the philosophy to me. And then I ordered all of the old Back to Godheads, which were available in those days, back to the 60s, and just started reading them all. And that was, so Prabhupada is saying here that often bhakti begins by Shravanam. And then the next two sentences are really interesting because Prabhupada uses the word quickly twice. He can quickly, but by hearing and chanting, when he can quickly become purified and cleanse the heart. And then the next sentence, so that he becomes quickly qualified to enter into devotional service. So one is that you quickly purify your heart. The next one is you quickly start or enter into bhakti. So this is the power of hearing. And it's good to analyze our life and think of what are we spending most of our time hearing. Are we mainly hearing the holy name, Srila Prabhupada's books, other devotional books, or are we mainly hearing the Hindustan Times, or, I'm trying to remember, what is it, Sky News or something like that in India? I can't remember the NDTV. Did I get these right? These are some of the news outlets, right? Or India Today, the magazine. Or now there's all these, some of these people on the internet who, really get into all the politics and things. So what do we hear? What are we, or are we hearing ISKCON gossip? And just scrolling through Facebook and trying to find some juicy criticism of other Vaishnavas? What do we spend our time hearing? Because what goes in here comes out here. You can, I don't, you can always kind of tell if someone is giving a Bhagavatam class and they're mainly quoting from news outlets or something like that, they probably are spending more time listening to news outlets than the Bhagavatam. And I would probably do the same thing, but I'm forced to read Prabhupada's books because I teach from them so often. So that's a great blessing for me that I have to. But it is powerful. And this word quickly, it reminds me of, it's trying to remember the chapter. I think it may be chapter 12, maybe verses 6 and 7. I know it's verses 6 and 7. Bhavami hi charat parta is the, if anyone knows that verse, you could look it up and put it in the chat. There's that verse that I become the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. And he very quickly becomes, and then another verse, he very quickly becomes righteous and attains lasting peace. Declare it boldly, Arjuna, that my devotee never perishes. Kuntaya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashati. So those are two other references that I can think of about this word quickly. Of course, quickly is a relative term, because Prabhupada says that Lord, in the 8th chapter of the Gita, in the purport, I think it's verse 18, he says that our Lord Brahma's life of 311 trillion years, 640 billion, is like a lightning flash in eternity. So I must have told you the joke before about I did tell you that joke, so I won't say it again. I remember I did, about the devotee who asked Krishna, how much is 10,000 crores rupees, and Krishna says it's just pocket change, right? Remember I told you that story, that joke? Yes. Okay. So this is Shravanam is so important, and then in the next paragraph is that quote from the Garuda Purana that is talking about hearing Krishna's name. And the example of a snake-bitten person can be brought back to life by the chanting of a mantra. And Prabhupada writes, so materialistic life means that one is bitten by the snake of Maya, illusion, and thus without any Krishna consciousness is almost dead. But he can be, then it goes on to say, he can be revived by chanting the Maha Mantra. And then the next paragraph is from the 4th canto. And there it's, let me just make sure I get this right. There it's talking about hearing the Lord's pastimes. And Prabhupada writes, if someone, the verse says, if someone eagerly continues to hear such transcendental sounds, meaning the pastimes of the Lord, then certainly he will become free from all material hunger, thirst, fear, and lamentation, as well as all illusions of material existence. And I think we have, maybe not that we become free from all hunger, thirst, fear, lamentation, etc., but where we are hearing about Krishna, and really saturating our mind, our heart with Krishna Katha, we do see the world differently, and we do react to the things that life throws at us differently. And we're going to be talking about that in the next section of this chapter. So it is a wonderful thing to be absorbed in hearing and chanting about Krishna. And then Prabhupada writes in the next paragraph, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also recommended this process of hearing as a means of self-realization in the present age of Kali. In this age, it is very difficult to follow thoroughly the regulated principles and studies of the Vedas, which were formerly recommended, like Varnashrama and doing this and doing that. It's difficult to do all those things. However, if one gives oral reception to the sound vibrated by great devotees and acharyas, that alone will give him relief from all material contamination. Therefore, it is the recommendation of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that one should simply hear from authorities who are actually devotees of the Lord. Hearing from professional men will not help. If we hear from those who are actually self-realized, then the nectarian rivers, like those which are flowing on the moon planet, will flow into our ears. This is the metaphor used in the above verse. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sometimes quoted that statement, I think it's by Lord Brahma, Stanesita Shrutigatam Tanubang Manopir. Stanesita means stay in your position. You don't have to take sannyas. You don't have to move to the forest. Stanesita, stay in your position, but Shrutigatam, but hear the pastimes of the Lord. And then the 12th canto is quoted in the very last part. A person who desires unalloyed devotional service to Lord Krishna, who is praised by transcendental sound vibrations, should always hear about his glorification and transcendental qualities. This will surely kill all kinds of inauspiciousness in the heart. So hearing is so important, so important. So what are your thoughts, questions, comments about hearing?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, do we have any restrictions that we need to hear always from only from Srila Prabhupada or our Guru Maharaj, or can we also hear from other devotees as well on a frequent basis?
Sure. Any ISKCON devotee in good standing, if you go, of course now we have COVID and things, but let's say you go to Vrindavan, you'll hear so many different devotees give class. Dinabandhu Prabhu will give class, Mukunda Datta Prabhu will give class, Panchagoda Prabhu will give class, Vaishnava Maharaj will give class, and Prabodhananda Saraswati Maharaj will give class, and this devotee, that devotee. And so it's always recommended, of course, to hear Prabhupada, his lectures, and read his books. But that doesn't mean we can't hear others. And of course, we may be inspired, especially by our Diksha Guru. But I don't know any Diksha Guru in ISKCON who would say, only listen to my lectures and not my godbrothers. And there's so many good speakers in ISKCON, Bhanu Swami, and Giriraj Maharaj. I mean, I could go on for the next half hour by Sheshika Prabhu and Gauranga Prabhu and Devaki Nandan Prabhu and Sukadev Maharaj. There's just so many. And there's all spectrums, right? There's on the like pure Shastra, you hear like Bhanu Swami will talk, like and really philosophical, maybe Radhika Raman Prabhu, right? And and then on the other end of the spectrum is someone like Gaur Gopal Prabhu, who doesn't talk so much directly about Krishna, but tries to bring people to the point of hearing about Krishna. And then you have devotees in the middle. His Holiness Jaipataka Maharaj, he loves to tell stories a lot about, especially Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Leela, right? And then relate that to practical elements of Krishna consciousness and Radhanath Swami. So we're so fortunate, I don't know how many, I think it's over 10,000, is it? Other lectures are on ISKCON Desire Tree. Some huge, it would probably take, several lifetimes to listen to all the lectures on ISKCONDesireTree.com. but there's many really powerful speakers. Satchinanda Maharaj, Burijan Prabhu. I personally like to listen a lot to the retreats at Govardhan on the VIG website. But we all have our tastes. Maybe you're interested in scientific preaching, so you listen to a devotee who does that, right? Or maybe you're really attracted to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela. Or I downloaded just yesterday, a friend of mine told me about this app called BVL, Bhaktivedanta Vedic Library. And it's an old friend of mine, Damodar Prabhu, who's put all of Prabhupada's books on audio. He reads them, just the translations, not the purports. But one of the really cool things about this app, and it's free, is that it has a timer on it. So I can listen to the Krishna book, Taking Rest, and it turns off automatically after whatever I set it for, 15 minutes or a half hour or whatever. So I could just kind of doze off hearing about Krishna's pastimes from the Krishna book. So we have, in one sense, it can be bewildering because there's just too much to hear. And we do have to be careful about that because so many devotees have written books. And Prabhupada said that is the duty, especially of a sannyasi, to write books. But we just want to be a little careful that while we read so many other wonderful books by so many other wonderful devotees, that we don't neglect Prabhupada's books. And of course, none of you will be doing that because we're studying Bhakti Shastri probably for the next year and a half or something like that. I don't know how long it's going to take, but it takes a while to go through the whole Bhagavad Gita. So is that all right, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu, thank you.
Yeah. But there's no injunction that one can only hear from one's Prabhupada or one's Diksha Guru. Diksha and Shiksha in the Chaitanya Charitamrita are on the same level. And it's one of the great opulence of ISKCON. Yeah. Too much to hear. One really nice thing that, it's kind of, you ever heard of edutainment? I think you can figure out, education and entertainment combined. So these devotees, Raghunath Prabhu and Kaustuba Prabhu, they have something called Wisdom of the Sages. Maybe some of you have heard of it. It's a very popular podcast. It's every day. They've done over 500 sessions. And Raghunath's kind of a funny joker kind of person, and Kaustuba is a real Shastric person. And they have over 7,000 people listen all over the world listening to it every day. I find it's nice. It's kind of light Krishna conscious, so I find it kind of nice to listen to when I'm cooking or cleaning, something that doesn't, because sometimes I can't focus on deep, heavy philosophy if I'm doing something like that. So anyway, we all have different tastes in things. Chaitanya Charan Prabhu has his monk podcast, and he has all kinds of great speakers on that. So it's, I think some devotees, it would be like that prayer by, there's two prayers. I think Rupa Goswami wrote one, and Prithu Maharaj, that they're both praying for thousands of ears to hear the glories of the Lord. So sometimes we wish we had, more than 24 hours to hear all the things that are available. Other questions, comments, thoughts on hearing?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhu, you talked about, sometimes in Bhagavatam class, quoting some news articles or something from, let's say, the current situations. So, is it okay that, there are a lot of devotees who quote current affairs in the sessions? So, and it's more from a perspective that, the audience is able to correlate to the subject or the topic that we are talking.
Yeah, that's totally fine. What I meant is if somebody's just only talking about news and they're not relating it. Yeah, of course, Prabhupada's early Back to Godhead magazines, maybe you've seen. He's often talking about what's happening in current events in India in the 50s and 60s, early 60s, or even back in the 40s he started. So that, that's totally good. In the Back to Godhead magazines, they used to have the Vedic Observer, and it would be a Krishna conscious angle on current events. And Prabhupada would do that often, right? He would say he saw an advertising sign or he heard this or that. Yeah. Is that all right, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we want Krishna consciousness to be relevant. And so we want to be able to show how something written 5,000 years ago or something that may have happened a million years ago, whatever, how we can relate that to our lives today. or how we can glean the essence of that. Good. Anything else? So let's carry on. So this next one is a very, very wonderful and very, very important part of the Nectar devotion. In the 10th canto, 14th chapter, verse 8, it is said, "My dear Lord, any person who is constantly awaiting your causeless mercy to be bestowed upon him, and who goes on suffering the resultant actions of his past misdeeds, offering you respectful obeisances from the core of his heart, is surely eligible to become liberated, for it has become his rightful claim." So this is a very famous verse. It goes, Tatenu Kampam Shukshamikshamano. And so there's two parts to this. Accepting reactions as Krishna's mercy. And the second part is repeatedly offering obeisances within the mind. So those are the two ways. So what this verse is telling us is how to practice Krishna consciousness when distasteful, bad things are happening in our lives, right? Or we're in an adverse situation. So this verse is showing us how to do that, to accept the reactions as Krishna's mercy, and to repeatedly offer obeisances of gratitude to the Lord. So Prabhupada, now listen, I think I mentioned this last week, the first sentence in the next paragraph. This statement of Srimad Bhagavatam should be the guide of all devotees. That's a powerful, that means this is a really important verse. The devotee should not expect immediate relief from the reactions of his past misdeeds. No conditioned soul is free from such reactionary experiences, because material existence means continued suffering, enjoyment, or enjoying of past activities. If one has finished his material activities, then there is no more birth. This is possible only when one begins Krishna conscious activities, because such activities do not produce reaction. Therefore, as soon as one becomes perfect in Krishna conscious activities, he is not going to take birth again in this material world. A devotee who is not perfectly freed from the resultant action should therefore continue to act in Krishna consciousness seriously, even though there may be so many impediments. Okay, so there may be so many impediments. We continue. When such impediments, I love this sentence, when such impediments arise, he should simply think of Krishna and expect his mercy. That is the only solace. If the devotee passes his days in that spirit, it is certain that he is going to be promoted to the abode of the Lord. By such activities, he earns his claim to enter into the kingdom of God. The exact word used in this verse is Daya Bhak. Daya Bhak refers to a son's becoming the lawful inheritor of the property of the father. In a similar way, a pure devotee who is prepared to undergo all kinds of tribulations in executing Krishna consciousness duties becomes lawfully qualified to enter into the transcendental abode. So, in the Indian tradition and even the Vedic tradition, the eldest son inherited everything, right? So that's what this verse is referring to, that just as the eldest son inherits everything, all he has to do is stay alive. In the same way, if a devotee develops this mood that's mentioned in this verse, then he automatically goes back to the spiritual world. Jiveti yo mukti pade sadayapak. So this is a guide for all devotees, because we all are going to have tribulations in our life. They have to come. It's part of the material world. Mhm. But we should simply think of Krishna and expect his mercy. That should be our only solace. And if we pass our days in that way, we will be promoted to the abode of the Lord. Prabhupada spoke about this on a number of occasions, this verse, many times. I'll read one. Tatenu kampam. Learned devotees accept, oh, by the way, this is from the second Canto 10, Chapter 2. Learned devotees accept even conditions of distress as representing the presence of the Supreme Lord. When a devotee is in distress, he sees that the Lord has appeared as distress just to relieve or purify him from the contamination of the material world. While one is within this material world, one is in various conditions, and therefore a devotee sees a condition of distress as just another feature of the Lord. So it's another, then he quotes the verse, Tatenu kampam. A devotee therefore regards distress as a great favor of the Lord because he understands that he is being cleansed of contamination. The appearance of distress is a negative process intended to give the devotee relief from this material world, which is called mrityu samsara, or the constant repetition of birth and death. To save a surrendered soul from repeated birth and death, the Lord purifies him of contamination by offering him a little distress. This cannot be understood by a non-devotee, but a devotee can see this because he is learned. A non-devotee therefore is perturbed in distress, but a devotee welcomes distress as another feature of the Lord. A devotee can actually see that there is only the Supreme Personality of Godhead and no second entity. There is only the Lord who presents himself in different energies. So now no one said that this was easy. Because no one said that going back to Godhead is easy. But we need to practice this. And then the whole world, otherwise someone reads Prabodhananda Saraswati's statement, Vishwam Purna Sukhayate, that the material world is just a place of happiness. And a devotee sees that and thinks, wait, he scratches his head and he thinks, wait a second, didn't we hear in Bhagavad Gita that Dukalayama Shashvatam, that it's temporary and miserable? So how can Prabodhananda Saraswati say Vishwam Purna Sukhayate? It's just Sukhaya. This whole Vishwam, this whole world, Purnam is completely Sukhayate. How is that possible? That's this verse. That when one goes through a distressful condition for a really fixed up devotee, that devotee sees that this situation is bringing me closer to Krishna, to him, Krishna. And therefore, he doesn't or she doesn't lament the situation. And it's really a test. It's really a test. 2 days ago, I had to go for like a minor investigatory procedure, a health procedure. And so I had all the tests and I had a fast for a day and a half beforehand or all these things. And so the doctor came out after the exam and said, well, the good news is you don't have cancer. The bad news is you have something else. It is not as bad as cancer, but like that. And I did not immediately go to this verse. I mean, like, oh no, really? I'm gonna have to change my diet, and there's different things that we have to make adjustments to now. So it's not easy to spontaneously, just like thunder and lightning, or lightning and then thunder, yeah. To immediately go to Tatenu Kampam, this verse about just expecting the Lord's mercy. So for me, there was a delayed reaction, but this is what we're being asked to rise to that level. Rise to that level of these two things. Accept the reactions as Krishna's mercy and thank him. Offer grateful obeisances in one's heart. So this is a very, very, very important 2 paragraphs in Srila Prabhupada's books. I would say two of some of the most important paragraphs in Prabhupada's books. And therefore, Prabhupada says this statement should be the guide for all devotees. Because if we know it's inevitable, there's got to be suffering, and we know we want to be devotees, so we want to learn how to react to that suffering in a spiritual way, in a Krishna conscious way. So very, very important. So what are your thoughts, your questions, your comments, on this very important verse, or very important section, or very important anga of bhakti, one of the 64 angas?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Question what is the meaning of becoming perfect in Krishna consciousness? How to become perfect?
Well, I think in this case, it means going back to Godhead. And how we become perfect is we chant Hare Krishna in the mood of the 3rd shloka of the Shikshastakam, Chinadapi Sunichena, Torarapi Sahishna, Amanina Manidena, Kirtaniya Sadari. And we get absorbed in chanting. So, because in several places, Mataji, it says that the sadhya and the sadhana and the sadhya in Krishna consciousness are the same. So, or the means and the ends are the same. So we chant Hare Krishna in this world, and we will be glorifying Krishna in the spiritual world, right? So our perfection, and so there's so many different ways to answer that question, Mataji. One way is to strictly follow the instructions of the spiritual master. That's one way. Another way is, we studied this earlier in this book, Smartavya Satatam Vishnuvi Smartavya Nijatuchit, to always remember Krishna and to never forget him. Another secret of perfection is similar to the first one about following the orders of the spiritual master, is to be absorbed in Vaishnava Seva and serving devotees. Another kind of perfection is doing whatever we can to spread Krishna consciousness. So there's different ways to, in this particular verse, it's talking about going back to Godhead. But we can already be back to Godhead even with this body if we're serving Krishna. There's that verse, Iha yasya harer dasye karmana manasagira nikila vasya vastasu jivan mukta su uchite. So one is jivan mukta, one is already liberated in this life if one is atashi Krishna namadi, one is absorbed in Krishna's namadi, name, form, qualities, pastimes. Is that all right, Mataji?
Yes. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hope I can follow this.
I hope I can. It's easy for me to talk about it. It's really not so easy to do it. Yeah. Other questions or comments on this point? Oh, I didn't look at the chat. There's something in the chat. Can you repeat the canto and verse? Oh, I'm not sure. Well, of this one, it's well, Prabhupada says it in the 10:14:8. If you like to memorize verses, this is a good verse to memorize. And we're going to have plenty of verses to memorize to get your Bhakti Shastri degree. But if you want to add some more nectar, you can memorize this verse.
Can you repeat the shloka again, Prabhu? The number
10:14:8. It's there in the Nectar Devotion. It says it.
Sure.
Right in the beginning of this section.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dandavat.
Yes.
Madhurapati. So,
Hare Krishna.
When such impediments arise, he should simply think of Krishna and expect his mercy. So when impediments, tribulations, problems, they come, and of course we can expect mercy, but thinking of Krishna, how to focus on that, Prabhuji? Can you please help us?
How to think of Krishna?
Yes, Prabhuji. When these
Well,
tribulations come.
Well, we can also, the first thing we might say is, this is my karma, and I should have gotten worse. But Krishna is so kind. So that's one way to think of Krishna's kindness. That because Prabhupada, like for example, I think you know the story that he once cut his finger a little bit, and he said, actually, my karma is I should have lost my whole finger. That Krishna minimized it. So that could be the first meditation, that accepting the reactions as the Lord's mercy, and that if I had not taken up Krishna consciousness, at least to the level that I'm trying to, it would have been a lot worse. So in that way, seeing the reaction as Krishna's mercy, and then offering grateful acknowledgements of Krishna's kindness within our mind. What else? I was just about to say something else. So it takes some strength of Krishna consciousness. For example, just really understanding that this material world it's not like your backdrop. Right, Prabhu, your backdrop is this beautiful beach somewhere in South India or Udupi maybe, or Goa. But life is not always a beach. Maybe it's a beach during a tsunami sometimes, but not always a beach. And really, because I think, there's certain things in Krishna consciousness that we know theoretically, but we haven't necessarily deeply accepted it. And one of them might be that we still kind of think, well, life is still pretty much supposed to have a good time, even as a devotee, right? And we know from the discussion between Yudhisthira Maharaj and Yamaraj, when Yamaraj asked Yudhisthira, what is the most wonderful thing in this world? And the most wonderful thing we all know is that he said that, people are dying at every moment, and still others think this is not going to happen to me. So, so how to think of Krishna? I think that's it. That we, this probably, if you read this, we have to read this this paragraph very carefully. He said we shouldn't expect to be freed from all of our karmas. We studied, if you remember earlier in Nectar Devotion, that karma is relieved from us on 4 stages, right? Prarabdha karma, aprarabdha karma, kuta, bija, like that. Remember those 4 stages that we studied, kind of very detailed. So, so therefore the devotee thinks, oh, I should have gotten much worse. Krishna's very kind. Let me offer my my obeisances and be absorbed in his service. So that takes, what it often takes, Mathurapati Prabhu, is friends who can tell us at the right time, at the right place, in the right circumstance, that how are you going, or maybe ask the question, how are you going to make advancement as you're going through this suffering? What's your plan? Ask. That's a powerful question to ask, isn't it? Sometimes we just want to say, Prabhu, don't you remember that verse in the 10th canto? You should just see this as all Krishna's mercy. And they may struggle to accept that. But if you say something like so, I know you know the philosophy, that verse in the 10th canto, but how are you going to try to get there? Because it seems that you're not there yet, but how do you plan on really getting to the acceptance of Krishna's mercy stage and get them thinking about what they already kind of theoretically know? Does that help at all, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, before we go to, what's that, Prabhu? Please continue. Done?
Thank you, Prabhu.
Oh, you're welcome. Before we go to Rasa Sindhu, let's see here. Pranavallabha Prabhu says, though facing a lot of difficulties, impetus to turn to Krishna is not happening. Can you please kindly enlighten? Yes, I can, from my own experience. There's different ways that we try to escape difficulties. We sometimes like to try to forget about them. And so we might, turn on a Bollywood or Tollywood movie or something like that. Or we find other shelters than Krishna, maybe in eating a lot of prasadam, it may be in sleeping, it may be in shopping, it may be, in breaking one of the principles. These are escapes from the reality that we have to think of Krishna. And we are, Krishna Buli Se Jeev Anadi Bahirmukh. We've turned our back on Krishna from Anadi, from practically, we can't remember how far, time immemorial. So the conditioned soul often looks for some escapes, something that can take their mind off of the difficulties that they're going through. It may be going on the internet for hours and hours and things like that. And what we want to learn is what should we do in a Krishna conscious way? And that is to take shelter of the devotees, to get guidance from the devotees, to take shelter of Krishna's name, to pick up our bead bag, and to learn to. And it sometimes is what's interesting is when we think we should do that, there's some initial inertia. It's called Hridaya Durbalyam, this weakness of heart. That if we just do it after 5-10 minutes, we think, oh, I'm so happy I took shelter of Krishna. I feel so much better. So Pranavallabha Prabhu, this is a very good question. And part of it is this Hridaya Durbalyam, the weakness of heart. And maybe also Asat Krishna, that we have a taste for the Asat. We have a taste for the temporary. So it is a conscious, willful, proactive decision to take shelter of Krishna when there's a difficulty. Now, sometimes it's natural. Like I find, I think I may have told you this before, that sometimes when we used to do traveling Sankirtan, we had some of the temple had very little money. And so we had these very terrible cars and terrible vans. And when the snow would come, sometimes we'd be in these very dangerous situations. And I can remember almost every time, the car seemed like it was going off the road, in those situations, I was pretty good at taking shelter of Krishna. But when we're kind of in a more complacent stage, we may find it hard to do that. But there's no there's no other show in town. You ever heard that saying before? It's just like, let's say you wanted to go to a movie, but there was only one movie theater in the whole town, and it was only showing this one movie. So if you want to go to a movie theater, you have to go to that movie. There's no second choice, right? It's the only show in town. So what we want to try to convince our mind is that Krishna consciousness is the only show in town. And there's no real serious other choice except taking shelter of Krishna. But the mind is, it's a troublesome person. It's, I think I told you this before, that I read recently that the mind, or I heard recently that the mind is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, Krishna is the center. You can't go there if you don't accept that. But in this world, most of us think that we're in the center. And so and the mind convinces us of that. And therefore it's a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. Okay, Rasa Sindhu Giridhari Prabhu.
My question is expecting Lord's mercy and accepting Lord's mercy.
Yes.
So, because again, we all have situations, stressful situations. So like the example you gave about Prabhupada said, my karma, I should be losing my finger, but it's only a cut. So I'm not even, let's say, talking about those kind of handling stressful situation. Let's say sometimes our desire of expecting something as Lord's mercy versus Lord's granting something else as his mercy. How do we train ourselves to accept that as Lord?
Well, I think part of your question, and maybe I got it wrong, is we may expect Krishna's mercy, but we want the mercy to come on our terms.
Somewhere, yes.
Yes,
Like
yes.
I'm desiring for a Rasgulla, but I get a Gulab Jamun as Fresh Mahaprasad.
Well, that's okay. That wouldn't be so bad. But you're expecting a gulab jamun and you get a 5-day-old sabji. That's a different one. It's interesting because the mind sometimes does that. I was speaking with Mahatma Prabhu the other day, and he was saying that sometimes the mind comes up with illogical thoughts, right? It says like, I don't want to get too serious about Krishna consciousness because then Krishna is going to take away everything. Right? Or my husband, Mataji might say, if I become really Krishna conscious, my husband might take, or if he becomes more Krishna conscious, he might take sannyas. So one technique that Mahatma Prabhu said he uses sometimes is he repeats what that person said. And then he asks the person who said it, start preaching to me. Another, you follow? Like if Brajeshwari Pranmataji says, oh, I don't want to become, my husband become too Krishna conscious because he might take, I don't even know if you're married, Mataji, but let's make believe you are, if you're not. And so I would say to her, I would say, now what would you say, Mataji, if I said, I don't want my husband to become too Krishna conscious, going to take sannyas. And she would probably say, oh, that's not a very big chance. It's probably 1 in 1,000. Really, you really think there's a connection between those two? I mean, what's your proof? And so they start preaching to themselves like that, and they get a good understanding. Is that helpful at all, Prabhu?
Somewhat, yes, Prabhu.
Okay, well, let's carry on and do the last two, although that was the most time-consuming ones. So remembrance and meditation are similar. The difference is that remembrance is generally about Krishna. And I'm sorry, let's say remembrance is and meditation is very specific. So it says here that simply by remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all living entities become eligible for all kinds of auspiciousness. But meditation, to meditate means to engage the mind in thinking of the form of the Lord, the qualities of the Lord, the activities of the Lord, the service of the Lord. So very specific. Meditation, and this is a beautiful statement, meditate because most people in the world don't think like this. Meditation does not mean anything impersonal or void. Most people, they do think it's impersonal and void. Then a little later, Prabhupada writes that one can avoid sinful reactions simply by remembering the Lord's form, qualities, and pastimes. So we get so auspicious. And I thought this was interesting about pranayama. Then the rest of the whole section is about this brahmana who came from the city of Pratishthanapura in South India. Anyone know where that is? Anyone ever heard of that? It might not be the same name nowadays as it was then. And he was not very well to do. You know, hopefully you read the story, and he didn't have much money or opulence. But he went to a pravachan once, and the speaker said that you can get all the benefits of offering opulent service by offering it in your mind. That all these activities, Prabhu writes, can be performed even by meditation. And then he writes, in other words, if a person is unable to actually perform Vaishnava activities physically, he can meditate upon the Vaishnava activities and thereby acquire all the same results. And this is a bit off to the side, but Prabhupada talks about it that in the next paragraph. Sometimes he would take his bath in the river Godavari. After taking his bath, he would sit in a secluded place on the banks of the river. And by practicing the yoga exercises of pranayama and the usual breathing exercises, he would concentrate his mind. These breathing exercises are meant to mechanically fix the mind upon a particular subject. That is the result of the breathing exercises and also the different sitting postures of yoga. Formerly, even quite ordinary persons used to know how to fix the mind upon the remembrance of the Lord, and so the Brahmana was doing this. So I think we talked about this in the past. We're not saying that you have to do pranayama to chant attentively. For some people, they have found that it's helpful to do 5 minutes of some deep breathing, or what is it? Aloma niloma. Anyone know there's different names for some of these different pranayamas, and sometimes it makes the mind peaceful and quiets the mind, and some people have found that it helps them chant japa. But of course, we understand the real essence of chanting japa is sincerity, not a mechanical process, but it can sometimes help. So just mentioning that. So then the story goes on, and the brahmana, for years and years, he's doing this daily. He's doing this whole puja in his mind. He's dressing the deities and cooking for them, and cleansing the temple with water jugs made of gold and silver. And he filled the jugs with holy water. And he didn't. What's really interesting, usually you can call the different rivers, right? Like, I don't know if you're familiar, like sometimes it's said that, when you're doing achmana, right? Before you do it, you can call the different rivers. You take out your Brahmin thread and put the second finger in the water, making sure your nails don't touch the water. And you say, Ganga cha Jamuna chaiva Godavari Saraswati Namar Sindhu Kaveri Jalishmin Sumitim Guru, right? That calling the different rivers to this Achman cup. But he didn't call the rivers, the Brahmana. He, in his mind, went to all the rivers, physically, every river, and collected water in the water pot. so sweet. And he was doing this as his sadhana for many, many years. And then, the beautiful last part of the story where he is preparing sweet rice and sugar, and he didn't want to offer the sweet rice when it's hot. And Prabhupada talks about how sweet rice is the cooler, the better for sweet rice. And so he wanted to see if it was too hot. And he came out of meditation and he actually burnt his finger, even though he was only meditating on it. And then Lord in Vaikuntha started laughing and Lakshmi, or the goddess of fortune, asked, why are you laughing? And he explained why. And then he called that devotee back to the spiritual world. And Prabhupada also takes a philosophical point out of this, that this shows how the Lord is all, this is the very end of the chapter. This shows how the Lord is all pervading, in spite of his being locally situated in his abode. Although the Lord was present in Vaikuntha, he was present also in the heart of the Brahmana when he was meditating on the worshiping process. Thus, we can understand that things offered by the devotees, even in meditation, are accepted by the Lord, and they help one achieve the desired results. So this shows that really there's no material impediment to practicing Krishna. Even if you're in jail, you can be offering arti to Krishna every day in a beautiful temple. You can build a new temple for the Lord in your mind and offer the best foodstuffs, the best arti. So there's really no material impediment to doing devotional service. So it's such a nice pastime, such a nice story. So questions, comments, thoughts on this? So these four things, hearing, expecting the Lord's mercy, remembrance, and meditation. Those are the four things. Now let's go a little bit more back to your question, because you were trying to make a distinction, I think, and I didn't really cover that, between expecting the Lord's mercy and what was the other point?
Accepting the Lord's mercy.
Accepting the Lord's mercy. Both can be deeply Krishna conscious. Expecting the Lord's mercy, it means the bhakta, the devotee, is understanding Krishna's position and accepting Krishna's position and accepting that Krishna is the controller, Krishna is the enjoyer. Now, accepting the mercy, that's also very nice. It's also very nice. It has this, by the English word, and that may not be your purpose in using that word, but it has almost like, okay, I can tolerate Krishna's mercy, I accept it. All right, I don't like it, but I accept it. It could be that way, that isn't really the meaning here. Because it can be deeply Krishna conscious also, if all throughout our day and our lives, we just accept the good and the bad as Krishna's teaching me something, Krishna's helping me in so many different ways. So they both can be very wonderful. They're slightly different, right? Expecting is understanding this nature of Krishna as Bhakta Vatsal, as someone who loves his devotees. And then accepting, it's kind of like, the Draupadi program. All right, I tried everything else. Now I surrender to you, Krishna. So does that help a little bit more? There's a slight difference there.
Yes, Prabhu, yes. So certainly the point that you made, that it can be deeply Krishna conscious as well. So how to make it, deeply Krishna conscious to accept whatever is the Lord's mercy. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Anything else? Okay, well, I think we can end a little early this week because this was a short chapter. Let's look at the next chapter. Chapter 11. There's a lot. Well, there's some more. If you can, read both chapter 11 and 12. We'll see if we can cover both of them next week. Okay, It's not a lot. It's probably 45 minutes of reading. Half hour. If you're a fast reader. Okay?
Sure. So we'll have both the chapters for the next session.
Yeah, for the next section.
Sure.
We're making headway, Prabhus. We are Prabhus and Matajis. We were going to do 19 chapters, and we're on chapter 11 and 12 next week. So we're getting past the halfway mark. Okay. So I also am a little tired today because I just that medical procedure kind of wiped me out a little bit. So I can take rest a little earlier if we end now. Okay,
Sure.
Prabhus? All right.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week. Hare Krishna.
So, Hare Krishna, everyone. We do have a couple of announcements on the exam front for the NOI. So we have had some discussion within the group, and also with Vardha Krishna Prabhu was chairing this meeting. So what we have decided, originally, of course, as part of discussion, we thought we will have the Nectar of Instruction exam. It will be an online exam. So we are not, at least for NOI, not planning a offline exam in the temple. So NOI will be an online exam. The protocol and process to be followed, we will share in the weeks to come. And the exam or the closed book exam, let's say, will be is scheduled for 31st of October. We were looking at 24th October, but then some devotees have other plans already. We don't want to disturb that. So we have decided 31st October will be the exam. We have almost a month on hand now to prepare for it. We will schedule a couple of sessions during the next 2 weeks to discuss the question bank of the closed book exam. So if anybody has any doubts, clarifications that they may be seeking, we can discuss in those sessions. The sessions will be led by Vardha Krishna Prabhu and some other senior devotees who can give us guidance on how to practically answer those questions. This is their application of concepts. And if anybody has not yet submitted the open book assignment, we will also schedule 1 or 2 sessions on that question bank, so that if anybody needs clarification there as well, will help in submission of the open book assignments as well. So our plan is that over the next 4 weeks that we have before the closed book exam, we will try to complete everything relating to the open book exam, as well as clarificatory sessions on the closed book exam. And 31st October, let's complete this. We should be more or less even completing Nectar of Devotion by then. As Prabhu said, Vihari Prabhu said, chapter 11, 12, and only 9 more chapters to go before we complete NOD. We'll also be commencing our homework assignments for Nectar of Devotion as well. So it will be kind of a parallel activity over the next 4 weeks to complete both the modules, so that maybe soon after we complete NOD, during the month of November, or let's say early December, we should also be scheduling the closed book exam for Nectar of Devotion as well. So kind of let's pick up the pace there so that we come online with all our modules. So that's all from my side. I know Chamkun Prabhu, Champani Prabhu, anybody wants to make any additional comment on the discussion we had on the call other day?
Nothing from my end, Prabhu. I'd like to talk to you after this.
We'll do that. Sure, we'll do that.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, regarding NOI exam online, is it what is the pattern, Prabhu? Is it MCQs or